Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. So if you've seen my hashtag Stand With Trans Kids video, you'll remember how excited I was to read This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel. My Aunt Jan had read it for her book club and was really excited to hear what I thought of it. Real quick, before I get into my thoughts on the book, I wanted to give Jan an opportunity to share what she thought of the book.
Hi everybody, Aunt Jan here. Kevvie asked me to share some of my thoughts about the book, This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel. Just a little bit of background about why I read this book. I'm in a book club in which we read books which are mostly fiction about different cultures and the social implications for those cultures. My turn was coming up to be the one to choose the book, and I decided that I wanted to have the group read a book about transgender people. I was a nurse in high school, so I've had some experience working with transgender teens. But when Kevvie began transitioning, it was suddenly a totally different thing. And I realized really how much I didn't know about what it meant to be a transgender person. So I read a ton of books, a ton of articles, and tried to educate myself as much as I possibly could so that I could give Kevvie as much support as I could. Kevvie and I have had many open discussions over the years, and I am continually learning things. And so I don't claim to be an expert in any shape or form, but I have found that I am kind of like an anomaly in my peer group because most people have very limited knowledge about what it means to be someone who is a transgender person. And so I often take the opportunity to pass on some of the knowledge that I've learned myself. When I decided that I wanted to pick a book that was going to be about a transgender person, Kevvie and I did a lot of looking at book reviews and different lists and tried to come up with a book that would be the best type of book for my group. I wanted something that kind of introduced the transgender issue and gave some kind of overall general information, but also something that was not sexually explicit or very graphic or very dark. And so after reading all of these different reviews, we settled on This Is How It Always Is. We figured, hey, Reese Witherspoon used it as her book club choice, and so how could it be bad? And recently I was at Barnes & Noble, and they had a book club reading table. You know, what are you reading this summer? And This Is How It Always Is was on the table. So it's definitely a book that is out there and is being read in book clubs. So I thought it was a good choice. My guess is that Kevvie is already talking about the book or has talked about the different characters and the main theme. The book is about an entire family. Rosie, the mom, who's an ER doctor, Penn, the dad, who's a writer, Claude/Poppy, who is really the main character in the book, and then 4 older brothers. What I liked was that it addresses how somebody's transition can affect everybody in the family. That the person who is transgendering, of course, is going through lots of different changes and lots of emotional and physical things. But the family members are also needing to process things and go through things at the same time. It's not an isolated thing for just one person. It's a whole system of people that have to go through the transition process. I liked the book because it wasn't sexually explicit. It wasn't dark, although it was sad at times. In the book, Claude/Poppy, very early on, like 3 years old, 4 years old, saying things like, I want to be a girl when I grow up. And I think that was important for people in my group to see that it's not something that somebody just at 25 years old decides, oh, well, I've been a male all my life, but, I kind of like dresses and I think I want to try some dresses on and, okay, I'll be a girl now. It really showed how it was something that was there from the very beginning and how it isn't something that is just made up. It talked a little bit about some of the treatments that they can use for adolescents or prepubescent kids, with the blockers and the hormone therapy. And it didn't go into a lot of detail, but I was glad that that was in the book so that people could see what some of the different choices are that people have to make, families and the child, as they approach adolescence. It showed how parents can react differently. I mean, a mother and a father can react very differently to the situation, and that some of the things that they do aren't right. They make mistakes, even though the mistakes aren't intended, but the parents are human, as are the brothers, and the other people in the family. So it kind of, from my perspective, showed that, even though somebody loves somebody and is trying, it's not always going to be perfect, and that it's a process. One of the things I really liked about the book is that the mother and father were talking to a therapist/social workers/something. And as the book went on, the therapist told the parents that they had actually made it too easy for Poppy because they had escaped and sheltered her and cocooned her at home and in their community. They didn't prepare her for the real world in which she would encounter difficult situations and wouldn't always be accepted by people, and that it would be hard at times. And by sheltering her and having the secret, that they really, really did a disservice instead of helping her, which is completely opposite of what they thought that they were doing. What I didn't like the book was that in some ways it wasn't realistic. When a transgender woman in the book is brought into the emergency room and the mom is on duty, and the transgender woman is badly beaten and ultimately dies from her injuries, the mom decides that the whole family needs to move across the country from Wisconsin to Seattle, which is more liberal and would have people that would be more accepting. And that in reality, not many families can just pick up, move across the country, still have a really nice house, still have a really nice job, and start all over. And when they started over, they kept Poppy's situation a secret. So they, from the beginning, presented Poppy as female. And there were consequences later on when Poppy's secret came out. When Poppy is outed in Seattle, the mom has the opportunity to go to Thailand. And so she takes Poppy with her. And I like the Thailand section of the book was good. I liked it because I learned a lot. I didn't realize that Thailand was a country that had a lot of transgender people, and that because their primary religion is Buddhism, that it's just kind of accepted that you are who you are, and in your next life you might be something else, but this is the way you are in this life. So I thought that was interesting, but once again, in reality, families don't have that opportunity to just escape and when things get a little rough. I thought that the dad in the book, Penn, was much more, I guess, realistic, and he spent time doing research. He was looking at things as far as treatments for when Poppy would get older, blockers, hormone therapy, and he seemed to be more grounded in just accepting it, and this is what it is, let's deal with it. Where Mom's primary way of dealing with it was running away instead of facing things head on. Although I really didn't like the mom's approach, I think that the book really shows that not every parent is going to respond the same way, and not every parent is going to do everything right. That it is a slow process that has to evolve, and hopefully eventually everybody, the parents, the other people in the family can come around and start doing the things that are right. But it isn't always an immediate right reaction. I am a straight cis female, and the people in my book club are straight cis females. And I read this book through the eyes of a cisgender person. And as much as I can be educated and talk to Kevvie and learn as much as I can, I will never know what it's like to be a transgender person. So I can understand how the book being read through the eyes of somebody who is a transgender person could have a totally different effect than it had for me. All in all, I think the book was a very good selection for my book club. At our meeting, we had a very meaningful discussion. There were a lot of questions. I had the opportunity to pass on some of the information that I have learned, both through reading and discussions with Kevvie, and also as a family member of somebody who is a transgender person. So I thought it was really a good introduction, and people said that there were things in the book that they would never have thought of, and that they learned a lot. And that's really what my purpose of bringing this book to the group was for, just to open the dialogue and to have people start thinking about things and possibly maybe change their way of thinking a little bit. And so I think that This Is How It Always Is was the perfect choice for my group.
The first few days of reading this book were really rough. I enjoyed it, and it prompted some excellent discussions with my aunt about things I'd never opened up about before. But it was also deeply upsetting. Like, it was making me cry almost daily. After the fifth consecutive day of being triggered by this book, I had to look up the author. Just as I suspected, this bitch is cis. She's the mom of a trans child, which explains why she wrote this book in the way that she did. But also, I'm bothered that a cis woman wrote this book because of the way that she's using our pain and re-inflicting this pain back on me every time I open this book. It's one thing when a sister, one of our other trans girls, writes about our shared trauma, because she gets it. She lives it. Laurie Frankel may have a trans child, but she herself will never understand the trauma that we experience. and how the way her book is written will hurt trans readers. This is a book very much by cis people for cis people, so that they can better understand the trans experience. But like, if you want to learn about the trans experience, why not talk to or read a trans person? Go right to the source. And the fact that she's profiting off of a pain that she's not a part of really doesn't make me feel good. I should have clocked it sooner, because even from the description I was getting suspicious. It bugged me that in the blurb they only ever referred to the trans girl as Claude and treated the name Poppy like a spoiler. That's not the kind of thing a trans author would do. In fact, when a trans author did do something like that, Alex Gino with the book George, it caused so much outrage that the book had to be completely reprinted with the new name Melissa. So I was side-eyeing this book from the get-go. Like, why do you get away with dead naming your child protagonist and Melissa didn't? Now I know. It's because she's cis. At first I was like, okay, this book is upsetting me, but it's also allowing me to be vulnerable with my aunt. But after a while it became more of a pattern of triggering, and the fact that it's a cis woman triggering me about my people's experience is just pissing me off. Like, trigger warning for violence against trans women and misgendering and all sorts of nasty ass fucking shit. There's a part where a trans woman is brought into the ER, and the main character's mother, Rosie, is the operating surgeon. The woman is brought in for a gunshot wound, and on closer inspection, they realize she had been horribly beaten as well. Then they remove her clothes, see a penis, and one of the nurses immediately runs out into the hallway and shouts, "The Jane Doe is actually a John Doe." And if that weren't bad enough, then Rosie decides to fantasize about how this woman wound up on her operating table, going into extreme detail about it being the poor woman's first college party, and the joy of a guy being nice to her, and then the fear of him maybe clocking her, and then he does, and then all the violence as his entire frat bro group whatever fucking beats her. This fantasy, because remember, it was all in that motherfucker's head, was so graphic and horrific and just completely unacceptable. Rosie was just a fucking awful character. While Poppy's dad was super on board with her transition, Rosie had to be dragged along, kicking and screaming every step of the way. Like, eventually Poppy gets outed at school, and everyone is making fun of her for being a boy. Understandably, Poppy has a hard time with this, and in her distress does a Britney Spears and shaves her head. That didn't turn Britney into a man, but apparently, according to Rosie, it does. Rosie immediately reverts back to misgendering and dead naming her child. And then it gets even worse because the narrator resumes dead naming and misgendering Poppy. The fucking narrator! It bugged me during the pre-transition stuff, but I gave it a pass because coming from a narrative perspective, it hadn't happened yet. Even though we all knew what was coming, technically it hadn't happened, so like, okay, whatever. But here, she's still clearly a trans girl, and they go back to fucking calling her a boy and shit, and it's so stupid. Every time I had to read her dead name or the wrong pronoun, it made me feel complicit in this hateful, harmful action. She obviously didn't stop being trans. She was a troubled kid lashing out. To treat that on par with detransitioning is just flat out offensive. Like, Rosie asks Poppy directly if she wants to be a boy or a girl now. And she responds, "It doesn't matter who I want to be. I have to be Claude. Being Claude is my punishment for lying to everybody." Clearly, this is not her saying, "I'm a boy now, so treat me like a boy." It is a cry for fucking help because she feels like she can no longer be herself. And then they go to fucking Thailand. Yeah, that was another thing. That whole Thailand bullshit was so fucking unrealistic. Like, this book is grounded in realism, yet we're supposed to accept that they can be like, "Oh, she got outed, so let's go to fucking Thailand while she recovers. Oh, look, there's ladyboys. I guess trannies are real." Yeah, no. Most trans people do not come from a place of such privilege where they can just travel internationally on a whim. Must be nice. But anyway, they're in fucking Thailand, and someone asks her what she wants to be when she grows up, and she responds, "I want to be Poppy." So she's clearly still been Poppy this whole damn time. So why are y'all still fucking calling her Claude and using the wrong fucking pronouns? Fuck! This book was so fucking insensitive. The author really does not get it. Her having a trans kid doesn't mean she gets the trans experience. The thing is though, this book isn't for trans people. It's for families of trans people. And in that way it works. It's great for people like Jan's book club, who are still new to the whole trans thing and trying to understand. They learned a lot from reading it and will now have a little more empathy towards trans people. But this book is not written for, nor should it be read by trans people. I'm bummed that this book weaseled its way onto my Pride TBR, but at least Jan liked it, and the school dance at the end was fun. But that's all. Do any of y'all know books about families of trans people that might be a little more sensitive than this one? Or just any other trans book recs? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!
Bye.